Hello, folks. I'm Katie.
I'm Vinny, and this is Learn Real Good.
Welcome back, learners.
Come on down.
Yes, you won a car.
Yeah, that's right. You didn't win a car.
Did you watch Price is Right as a kid?
I watched so much Price is Right.
Oh my gosh.
What are your favorite games?
Oh my gosh. It has to be the Yodeler.
The Yodeler. Yeah, Yodeler's pretty great. I think mine's Plinko.
I mean, those are the two.
Plinko and the Yodeler are both the best. I mean,
I know.
The Plinko has such a very satisfying sound. It
Yes.
looked really fun.
Yes.
The way the little puck bounced was very satisfying. And then the Yodeler, the song. That
is
Yodeler
that what it
song.
is? Like, what is it?
Well, he's a
that
very
made it so
charming
popular?
yodeler, and he's going up this little ruler, and then he can fall off.
Yeah.
Everyone knows the sad Price is Right song.
Back to Plinko. My dad made a toy that was like a piece of plywood.
Okay.
And then like with
pegs?
elastics, he made like, with like nails and elastics, he made a Plinko thing. And there's like like money amounts at the bottom. And he
Your
just put a marble.
dad made you a Plinko board.
I don't think he made it for me. It existed in the house. I don't know who he made it for.
For himself.
Probably one of the older siblings or him.
So, yeah, he just made it like, I'm going
In
to play
case
Plinko.
Bob Barker came on down to our
ready.
house. Yeah, we
I'm
would have
ready to
had
play.
the toy.
Yeah. You didn't make a yodeler for you, though.
No, but that was always my favorite game. And it went away for a while to the point where I was like, did that really happen? You know, those childhood memories where you're like, was that a dream or was that a thing? And then it came back. And that was a good day.
It's a great day.
That was a good day
Everyone
in my house.
loves the yodeler.
I found, though, like, I never got better at Price is Right, though. I could never guess. As a child,
I
have no concept of money.
When do you ever buy any of those items? How much is this deodorant? I don't know. I don't use deodorant. I'm
But
poor.
you'd think like years of looking at the price of like, toothpaste, I would have learned something.
You didn't.
No. But today we're going to learn something.
Hopefully.
So welcome to Learn Real Good if you're a new learner out there. The way this rolls is me and Vinny just shoot the breeze.
Yep.
Check. Nailed it. Breeze shot. And then we're going to share some facts.
Science facts.
Science facts. And then we're going to have a guest, and we have an awesome guest today.
Yeah, I'm really excited.
I'm very excited to learn real good. Yes. Okay. Shall we
Yeah,
fact?
who wants to fact?
Who wants to fact? You. You
All right,
look like
you're
can't
pointing
hold
at
it
me
back
and I'm
anymore.
ready to go. I can't.
You can't.
I need to share this fact.
Okay, then go.
All right, Katie. Well, let's start here. Let's start real simple. An atom.
Yes.
You know what an atom is?
I do.
What is it, Katie?
It is the smallest particle that retains the properties of the element it represents.
Look at that. It's
I'm teaching that this week.
Yeah. So yeah, that's right. It's
Please tell me that's right.
That is correct.
Oh.
That is correct. So yeah, all of the elements in the periodic table are divided up by atoms. So atoms, some example of atoms you may know are oxygen, hydrogen, aluminum is an atom, gold is an atom, but atoms aren't the smallest things that we know.
But that is what the word means.
Yes.
Atom means cannot be cut.
Oh, Tom.
Well, atom.
Yeah, that's
the
fascinating.
A is cannot and tom to cut.
I did not know that.
Yeah.
Look at that.
Well,
There's a
all
fact.
sorts of
Done.
science. Done. That's my fact.
All right. But in fact, it can be cut.
Yes.
This knife, this atom
Ching.
can be cut.
Yes.
That was what was
Forged
that?
in Fire
Forged in
reference.
Fire reference. So if you're a big Forged in Fire fan, you know
That's
where
for
that
you.
came from. So atoms, so they can't really be cut
Right.
in the sense that you can make them split apart their elements, but they are made up of stuff.
Yes.
And the stuff that's inside of them are called quarks, the little tinier particles that live inside the atom, that make up the atom. But they cannot really be separated. They can only exist as like a group. So if you try to take one out of it, so much energy is required to extract one that you've put up enough energy into the system to create a pair. And so now you've created a pair of atoms. So you can't get quarks. Quarks only exist as little atomic particles or quark pairs.
Point of information. You went straight from atom to quarks.
Yes.
Doesn't it go like atom to protons, neutrons, electrons to
Yes,
quarks?
sorry, you're right. So
I'm just
no,
curious.
this is a great point. So atoms, when I'm thinking of an atom, I'm thinking of a hydrogen atom because it's just a proton. So
Well, keep it easy.
you're right. So I skipped a step. So there's atoms, and then inside the
Proton
atom,
and an electron.
yes. Well, just a proton is a hydrogen ion.
Oh, ion. Yes. Okay.
So inside the atom, there's protons and neutrons in the
Right.
center, and on the outside there's electrons. And so inside the protons and neutrons, there are quarks.
There we go.
In the electron, there are no quarks. It's
Correct.
its own. That's the tiniest one we found inside the electron.
Gotcha.
So inside the quarks,
Yes. Oh no.
we don't think there's anything. We think
Okay.
that's
Whew.
it. That's as
It's
far as
gotta
it
end
goes.
at
It's got
some
some
point.
point. It's got to stop. But here's what's new.
Oh no.
So one proton, which is a piece of the center of the atom,
right,
has 2 up quarks and 1 down quark. That's the recipe, right? So if you have 1 up quark and 2 down quarks, you get a neutron. So
weird.
So one makes up a proton, one makes up a neutron. There's a bunch of other particles. Those are the big 2, the proton and the neutron. And we know this very, very precisely. We know exactly how much a proton weighs to like a very high degree. Okay. We know how much a neutron weighs to a very high degree.
All right.
And here's what's weird.
Uh-oh.
The up quarks, the 2 up quarks
yes.
and the 1 down quark are very light, but the proton is very heavy compared to those 3 things. To the point where if you just take the mass of 2 up quarks and 1 down quark, it only adds up to 9% of the mass of a proton.
How can that be? What else is in there?
What else is in there? That's a great question, Katie.
Oh no, do we know now?
So we know to a very high degree of accuracy that the proton's mass, like we know it to like a bazillion digits. So any little thing.
Bazillion.
Okay, that's not a technical term, but we know it to a lot of numbers.
Sure.
So it's very highly known.
Okay.
So 9% of the mass comes from the quarks. Mm-hmm. And then you have about a third of the mass that comes from all of the energy of those quarks moving around in there.
Okay.
So they're not just sitting there. They have to move around. So that's a bunch of energy. And when you're at that level, energy and mass are interchangeable. Like Einstein says, E equals mc squared. E equals energy, m equals mass. They're related.
I know that.
Great.
I have that tattoo.
So about a third is it moving around.
Yes. Okay.
You have another roughly a third of it just being the force that's holding it together. Otherwise, they'd fly apart.
Right.
So you have the weight of the quarks. Mm-hmm. You have the momentum like the energy generated by them zipping around in there. You have another third that's being held together. And then there's the last like remaining part. So there's 9%, a third. That last part is these quantum effects. So that just like holds everything together. Quantum mechanics. So there's a whole bunch of other quantum energy that's being spent existing in there.
Whoa.
And then they're like, oh, wait, there's something else happening. So this is the new discovery.
Okay.
And it hasn't totally been 100% certified yet. This is how fresh this news is.
Fresh
science facts. One element of this mass that seems to come from another quark hanging out in there. So there's a quark and an anti-quark that are hanging out in there called a charm quark. And a charm quark, so the proton is something like 900 MeV. That's the unit you use for when you're talking about the weight of a proton. The charm quark is like 1,000 on its own.
The charming quark.
The charm quark. But whenever it exists, it pops into existence with its antiparticle. So the mirror image. So the charm quark and the and so that's 2,000 MeV. But it only exists for a brief moment of time. So these like positive and negative particles pop into existence and then pop out of existence. And so, but it exists for such a brief fraction of the time, you have to multiply it by the fraction of time it exists. And it turns out roughly 0.5% of the mass of the proton comes from these quarks, these big giant quarks popping into existence, popping out of existence.
Okay, now I want to trust you because you're an honest guy, Vinny.
I'm trying to
be honest.
This
sounds like a load of baloney.
Okay,
I'm going to be honest.
Yeah.
How are they popping in and out of existence?
So this is one of the weird things of quantum mechanics.
I don't like quantum mechanics.
The universe there's no such thing as a vacuum.
Wait, what?
So there's no part of space where there is nothing.
The Dyson is crying in the corner.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay.
So you have to there's always some latent energy in the universe. So if you have a room that's empty, okay, let's take a bank account. Let's say I have a bank account.
Okay.
Okay, it's at $0.
Uh-oh.
All right. What can happen in the universe's bank account is a coin for $1 can appear. But if a coin for $1 appears, a coin for negative $1 also has to appear.
That's alarming.
And so that you haven't actually created or violated any kind of conservation of mass or energy. And so, but it has to immediately disappear. But they're very, very low energy. So there's the baseline energy of the universe exists. And so quantum mechanics says these things can appear. So a negative one coin exists and a plus one coin exists. They can pop into existence and disappear.
Quantum mechanics is zany stuff. The next thing you're going to do is say, like, me observing something can affect its existence.
Well, that's another... I'm not going to get into that today. So that's my fact.
That seems like a significant fact.
Yeah, in the proton, they found these crazy huge particles that exist for a fraction of time, and it adds to the proton's mass. And
wow.
Like, wow. All right, we know where that part comes from.
crazy.
So they're still accumulating data to really confirm it, but that's what it looks like.
Did people only just realize that there was this, like, did people assume for a long time that, oh, the weight of a nucleus, it must just be the quarks? And then they weighed it and they're like, oh,
small.
crap.
It's so small. This 0.5% of this very tiny number is hard to measure.
Yeah.
So they're like, okay, is the challenge when you're dealing with this like 0.5% in a very small number is that the noise in the system. So if you're measuring, it's like trying to hear a whisper in a crowded room. So the whisper might exist, but you have to like listen very, very hard for it. That's what doing the experiment many, many, many times lets you do. It lets you like subtract the noise from the background, and then now you get a signal. So it's a very tiny signal.
Whew. Good fact.
Good fact.
That seems important.
Yeah.
Get on that, physicists.
Keep accumulating protons.
All right, ready for my fact?
I'm ready for yours.
Okay, we were going straight to Jurassic Park.
All right.
So describe the Tyrannosaurus Rex in Jurassic Park.
The Tyrannosaurus Rex, big, has a big eye, likes to look into cars.
It's unfortunate you described the eye as big.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, compared to my eye, I think it looked very large.
For its head size?
For its head size.
Okay.
In Jurassic Park, it only can tell if you move.
Which was a great narrative choice.
Yeah, but probably
it's
not
very
true.
exciting.
Probably
No, not true at all. Not true at all.
And wants to eat kids.
Yeah. Okay. Well, so the eye is where our fact is centered.
Because that's a famous shot where the eye of the Tyrannosaurus comes right next to the kid's window.
It's so scary.
It's a signature shot.
It's such a great film. Okay. Besides that, this isn't about movies. This is about T-Rexes.
Okay.
So it's interesting you describe the eye as big because the T-Rex actually has a teeny tiny eye
Compared
for its
to
head.
Okay.
Yes.
Little beady eyes. Well, that's why you can only tell when you move.
So that's not true.
Oh.
They have good eyesight, but not great because they are constrained by the fact that their eye is small.
They shouldn't read in the dark. That'd kill your eyes.
So when you look at the skull of a T-Rex and you look at the eye socket,
yes.
Do you know what the eye socket looks like?
Intimately. I've got it memorized.
Go on.
So it's about the size of a grapefruit.
Okay, so Vinny doesn't know. So typically an eye socket is circular-ish, right?
Yeah.
Fits a big spherical eye.
That sounds normal.
Right. Okay, so the T-Rex eye socket does not look like that. It's described as being keyhole shaped.
Oh.
So it's sort of like circular, but then it goes up like that. There's like a bit of bone in it.
There's like a little curlicue.
Yeah, I like to describe it more like a jack-o'-lantern eye. You know, like the circular jack-o'-lantern eye, you leave like a bit of pumpkin.
Oh, interesting.
Like that?
Yeah, okay.
Okay, but the pumpkin's the bone in this case. Okay. So because of that little jutting out, the eye is actually much smaller than the rest of the eye socket. Like if this was just pure hole, you'd have a big ass eye.
Right.
But because of this little nubbin, the eye is constrained to like the area where it can completely fit in there.
So what's going on in the rest of that socket?
Great question. Okay, so
it's where it keeps like cool things, like it's like a pocket.
So you mentioned something else about the T-Rex aside from his apparent atrocious eyesight, and that is he likes to
eat children.
Right. Okay. So they don't eat children. Obviously, we didn't coexist, but. Eating. They have a very powerful bite.
Yeah.
So it turns out the hypothesis, this is the new hot fact, for the reason why the eyes are small is because the importance of that little horn of bone in the eye socket actually allows for more muscle attachment.
Whoa.
So like muscles have to attach to
points
bone,
on your skull,
right? Usually via connective tissue, right? But you need that bone surface area for muscles to attach. You can't just have muscles glued on like putting gluing things on.
What? You can't have muscles like gluing things on. That's a famous saying.
I used gluing things on as an analogy for gluing things on.
Yeah, you did.
In any case, so apparently,
I really want to see your scrapbooks.
So that bone bit is really important for it having this big, powerful bite.
Oh, interesting.
And so it's not just T-Rexes. A lot of large carnivorous dinosaurs have these tiny eyes, or hypothesized to have tiny eyes because of this jutted out bone,
extra muscle
to facilitate. And what's cool is this changes throughout its life.
Oh.
Baby T-Rexes do not have that bone.
No.
That bone sort of grows
like a baby tooth.
Yeah, so when they're babies, they actually do benefit from those bigger eyes and subsequent better eyesight because they're chasing after prey, and that requires better vision.
Sure.
Whereas when they're bigger, they're usually just like grabbing something with one foul swoop, and it's more important for them to have very powerful jaws and just like destroy their
alligator
prey.
style.
Yeah, exactly.
Do alligators have that bone?
Holy crap. Let me look that up. Alligator eye socket.
I would think that an alligator. I mean, if I think of animals that rely on their bite. Like, I think sharks and I think alligators. And I'm like, well, sharks are probably not going to have that. They're not that closely related to dinosaurs. But alligators, which also, I agree, not related necessarily that closely to dinosaurs, but kind of. So do alligators have
I
those?
am looking this up as we discuss.
Can you imagine?
It doesn't seem
so.
Right. It doesn't seem to be the case.
Well, alligators, get on this. You can really double your biting power if you just like do this one.
Well,
cool
maybe
trick.
they're doing something else, right? They have a very different sized,
Yeah.
shaped jaw. So there's other stuff going on there.
Click to learn this one cool trick. Pray, hate it.
That's a fake
That's
news
really cool.
tactic, Vinny.
That's really cool.
Yeah, not too bad, right? Who doesn't love a T-Rex?
Who doesn't love extra bones for biting?
Not extra bone, just a different shape. It's not like a separate bone.
It's not a separate
right?
bone.
No,
okay.
no.
It's just a little outgrowth.
Yeah, sort of like a panda's thumb. Ding.
What? Now you're gonna have to go from tell me a one sentence summary of the panda's thumb.
I'll save that for a future fact. Future fact. All right. Well, enough goofing off from us.
Let's meet our guest.
Oh my gosh, I'm excited. I have the honor of introducing our guest this week. Our guest is Alexander Araujo. Alexander is a Master's of Natural Resource Management student at the University of Manitoba. His thesis looks at how a herd of plains bison that were reintroduced into Banff National Park in 2017 are affecting the bird community in the park. Alexander enjoys running games of Dungeons and Dragons, photography, hiking, and is slowly mastering the art of baking cookies in the backcountry. Please join me in welcoming Alexander to the show.
Hello, Alex.
Hey, thank you guys for having me.
Thanks for being here. And you're reporting live from Canmore, is that true?
I am indeed, yep, right in the heart of the beautiful Canadian Rockies. Have a decent view of Howling Mountain just outside my window here.
Amazing.
Are there any bison currently looking in the window at you?
No, we're outside of the national park here in Canmore, and the bison are pretty well back in the backcountry of Banff itself. So nothing right now, but who knows? Maybe someday, far in the future, that would be the dream.
Some urban bison.
That would, oh, geez, can you imagine?
Terrifying.
Well, the kids would have to not move, so you don't get caught by the bison.
Not every animal acts that way.
Every animal chases children and can only see you by moving.
Okay.
Exactly, that's right.
So, Alexander, let's ask about the bison first of all. So they were reintroduced in 2017. Where did they go? How long had they been gone? What killed off the bison?
Yeah, that's a really interesting kind of complicated question. If you don't mind me like waxing poetic for a little bit here.
Please.
Basically, if you look at depends on the sources you look at. So if you look historically, specifically historically with European writers around the turn of the century, they'll put a lot of blame on indigenous people. So basically say that they overhunted them. And that, of course, is not true. More contemporary sources, you'll see typically put more of that on the settlers and have an idea that like people came through and just shot every bison in the world. And that's less not true, but it's not exactly like the most nuanced view in the world of how it happened. It was, you can imagine like prior to European contact, the population estimates for plains bison ranged from 30 to as many as 100 million of these animals.
Whoa.
Whoa.
Yeah, crazy amounts of them, right? And their range extended from, where I am right now on the eastern edge of the Canadian Rockies all the way out to the Mississippi River. So this was a gigantic area that they existed in. So to make a decline like that happen, it has to be a lot of different sources. So what it comes down to very simply is over time, first you have this kind of recontextualization, this redefinition of the indigenous relationship to bison. Right? When the fur trade comes in, suddenly plains bison are no longer this thing that lets you survive on the landscape. They're now an economic tool. You harvest them, and now you can trade them and better your life through different tools, through beads that you can use for artwork, for firearms, which let you produce or that are better for hunting or strengthen your nation in times of war. And this demand for bison pelts starts to increase through the Industrial Revolution because I didn't know this before I started working with Rocky Mountain House Historic Site a few years ago. Bison pelts, they use them for conveyor belts during the Industrial Revolution. Huge demand for those.
They use the fur or just the skin from it?
They just scrape the skin off.
Yeah.
It's super
leather,
sturdy
basically.
Stuff. Yeah, exactly. It's a gigantic thing, or it's just stitch them together, I guess. And
that is fascinating.
It's really, really, it's crazy, yeah. And by the 1870s or so, the writing is kind of on the wall, and now you have like settlers coming in.
Mm.
They're all starting to hunt as the fur trade is increasing to try and get more bison pelts. The fur traders eat bison, so now to fuel the expanding fur trade, you need to eat more bison, you need to hunt more bison to eat more bison, so you can get more. It's this whole snowballing effect.
Oh no.
And right around the end of the 1870s, you also have the Canadian and American governments looking at this decline, and they're saying, okay, we want to put our people out on the West. We want to settle the West. And as long as the bison are existent on the landscape, the Plains First Nations and the Métis, they're strong. They're able to follow these herds around. They're in a position of power. But hey, those herds go away, suddenly we're in a really good negotiating position for those treaties. So there was also deliberate extermination on the part of those colonial governments to try and basically get rid of those herds as quickly as possible. And our herd's origins trace themselves back to two men. I believe one fellow's name was Samuel Coyote, but I can't quite remember. They were both from the Pen d'Oriel First Nation in Montana. They preserved a small herd with the Shuswap First Nation when that was happening. They managed to keep it on their land and keep them from being exterminated. And that's where Banff's herd kind of traces their roots back to, because of these two guys.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Wow. So
crazy story. Sorry.
Wow. No, that was amazing. So when all these bison were killed off, so these guys had their own little private herd that they're taking care of. Were there any other bison, or was this like the lone little pocket that was left?
There were a couple. I know there were a couple. I think one was Métis. The other one was a settler in Manitoba. I can't remember their names, but I believe they also had like a small herd there. So there were a few here and there that managed to be saved, but I think like the population was down to a few hundred by like
Unbelievable.
like it's a classic tale of basically conservation of like these things almost went away and we just barely managed to keep enough around to keep them from going extinct. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah,
well,
it's crazy.
I'm glad there's a program to bring them back.
Been very successful. I mean, nowadays the majority of the population is raised for meat consumption. You'll have a lot of them that are being put onto ranches. Yeah.
So what were the environmental impacts of losing bison? So people might not know, like, okay, they were delicious and beautiful, and of course all living species have value intrinsically, but like, what did they do for the environment?
Totally. So like as far as my research is largely concerned, their biggest influence was maintaining grasslands. So historically it was fire and bison that led to like the retraction of these forest ecosystems and the expansion of grasslands and plains across North America. And when Europeans came in, we sort of took away the bison. We started controlling fire on the landscape, and now we've seen in the last 100-200 years a massive expansion of forests instead. So that's kind of been the biggest loss that we've seen from bison. In terms of other stuff, they do affect the land different than cattle, which have been largely what replaced them on the land as far as like major grazers go. But basically, there are other services they would provide is like nitrogen deposition. So whenever they poop, basically you get all these different chemicals and fertilizers into the soil. Lots of different insects will live off of that, which helps feed the surrounding bird community. Their fur is very warm, so animals that make nests would use that for a lot of stuff. Huge amounts of calories deposited into the environment whenever they die, so great for scavengers and for wolves and for human beings. All sorts of stuff like that, which are pretty cool.
Yeah, it's always surprising to learn. I think it's very counterintuitive, the effect of a grazer on grass, right? You would think that something eating grass must be bad for the grass, right? It's going to lead to there being less grass, but actually grass needs a certain amount of disturbance to sort of be successful, and actually having those grazers chewing on the grass leads to more grass.
Which is why I always eat grass wherever I sit. Just to help the grass.
We've been meaning to talk to you about that. So how many were in the Banff project? How many bison were brought in to reintroduce? Like 2,000? How many bison?
Totally. So we had in 2017, Parks Canada brought 16 plains bison from Elk Island National Park into Banff National Park. So yeah, that was my colleagues with parks who were doing that at the time, and it was a massive endeavor to do so. But yeah, they very humble beginnings. They brought 16 of them into an area called the Panther Valley, and they held them there for 1.5 years to kind of get them used, because Elk Island's in the prairies. There's no running water out there, so got them used to like going over rivers and going up and down mountains and stuff like that. In that little, and they not little, it was a pretty big pasture, and kind of to ground them to the land. And then they popped the pasture open in June or July of 2018, and they've been free roaming throughout a 1,600 square kilometer area in the backcountry of the park ever since.
Wow.
Question, Alexander. If we're trying to bring back the bison, is it really wise to introduce them to a place called Panther Valley? That seems like we're just bringing them into the, out of the frying pan into the fire.
Maybe they're trying to help the panther population.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, if it helps, I mean, apparently the name for the valley comes from a Stony Dakota term for the valley where the panther was killed. So maybe, not so many predators out there.
Again, that's counterintuitive. Yeah. I hear Panther Valley. Yeah. I think
a valley full of panthers.
Yes, just chock-a-block.
No more panthers, though. This should be called No More Panther Valley.
Yes, No More Panther Valley.
Yeah, the lack of Panther Valley.
Lack of Panther Valley. That's our suggestion. Well,
that's what you should put the bison.
That's perfect.
Perfect for bison.
I think their wolves are pretty much their big predator, but panthers or cougars, I should say. We don't really have panthers out here, but yeah, we're hoping the wolves will start trying to get them pretty soon.
Now, how do you get 16 bison from one park to another?
It's a heck of a thing.
You just have like a carrot on a stick?
Minivan. Yeah. Full wrong. No, so it's really cool. What I recommend for anyone who's interested in seeing it. So Parks Canada produced a really, really well done video series documenting the transfer of the bison from Elk Island to Banff. It's extremely well shot, but to kind of give the Cliff's Notes of it, they put them in these like sea cans, like the things they put on container ships.
Oh, right.
Like a little bit smaller, but they put them in there, and they had like hay and stuff, nesting material for them to kind of lie down in. And a colleague of mine, it was funny, he was telling me this story, went up to Edmonton to a hardware store, and he brought rubber tubing like for a hose, and it was to go around their horns so they didn't like poke each other while they were in the tubing. He goes to the guy, and he was like, "Oh, you're putting down some irrigation canals?" And he's like, "No, actually, I'm gonna be doing." I was like, "Oh, okay."
I've got to put safety pointies
on these bison. Yeah. So what they did is they put them in there, put them all in the cages, and they drove out to the government has a horse ranch called Yahatinda. I believe that's where they based this out. It's about as far west as the road will go before you hit the park boundary. And then they got a super heavy lift helicopter, this massive thing. God. And they helicoptered them from Yahatinda Ranch about 40-ish kilometers up to the Reintroduction pasture. And it's amazing shots of this like massive helicopter, like they put like the slow-mo on it coming down, and then landed the sea cans in there, popped it open, you just see the bison like running out through the snow, all the snow plowing out through them. So cool.
Only imagine what is going through those bison's minds. It's like, oh, I'm going into this little cave. Oh, wait, what's happening to the cave? The cave is flying.
Where are we? Oh, this place looks pretty neat. Oh, there's hay over here. Great.
Let's go. That's incredible. Wow, I'm definitely going to check that out.
Yeah.
All right, so Alex, tell us about your research. Like, so these bison, they're wandering, they're roaming, they're doing all the things that bisons love to do. They graze, they poop. They're just bisoning it up. And so you're looking at their impact on birds. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So basically my kind of basis for my research is exactly that. So when bison go into an area, they're going to be changing it. They're what we call ecosystem engineers. And one of the methods they do that with is grazing. So what the kind of mechanism I guess I'm looking at with that is, you can imagine in a prairie ecosystem, if you have an ungrazed area, the height of the grass in that area is intuitively going to be much taller than an area that they've been grazing more heavily. And right now, one of the big questions we have with the Banff herd is, bison, we can say really like the last recorded sighting of a bison in the park that we know of was about the 1840s. We don't really have any contemporary Western knowledge of them in the park. We know they were here for tens of thousands of years beforehand, but we're not really sure what effects they're going to have on the other species that are living there, how they're going to change things. And my thought is that we can look at birds as kind of like an early indicator of this change, because birds are pretty sensitive to changes in their ecosystem, and they're really sensitive to changes in vegetation structure. So that's that idea of, like plant height. So as the grass is, when they're really tall, you might have some ground nesters that really like that because it gives them good camouflage from other predators. Maybe it's a little bit cooler cooler for their eggs when they're nesting, versus if you have a really heavily grazed area, I can see the insects a lot more easily. Great. As a bird that's living in a shrub, I'm going to prefer to go that because I'm going to sweep down into there and get my insects. So I'm going to do better in a more heavily grazed area. Yeah, so that's kind of the theory, quote unquote, behind what I'm trying really to figure out.
And so, how many bison are there now?
We are, I believe, at 82.
Whoa!
It's going.
They go quick.
In 5 years. That's pretty incredible.
Good work, bison.
They're pretty wild. The parks did a habitat suitability index in 2016, which predicted we could have as many as 1,000 in the park. Whoa. Ideally, we don't want it to get quite that high. That's a lot of them for being back there. Okay. But we could definitely have quite a few within a relatively short window here, which is pretty cool.
Whoa! And do we know if any of the OG original 16 have died? Are those all just babies or?
No, let me think. No, none of the original, because the originals that were brought there are all pretty young. Okay. We have lost, I think, three of natural causes so far, or maybe two. They were both calves. One, I believe, we're not really sure, might have been a wolf kill. The other one I'm not 100% on. Yeah. And then we had there were also parks had three. I think there were three escapees. Yeah, that have occurred. So there is a fencing system to try and keep them from going out into the province, just because there are some issues with stakeholders and grazing out there. Sure. And a couple of them, they want to roam. That's what bison do. Ended up exiting the park, and two of them met some unfortunate ends there because of the lack of resources parks had at the time to deal with it, and one of them we were able to recapture, and he's living a very happy life at Rocky Mountain House Historic Site. So worked out pretty well there. But anyway, as far as natural causes go, we've the original 16 are all pretty much still chilling there. Wow. And we've had a couple calves that died of natural causes so far.
Okay,
that's kind of amazing that they were if they've been not imprisoned. They've been taken care of. But bred in captivity for 100 years, and then they were set free, and they're like, yeah, this is better. This is fine. We're fine.
It's pretty crazy. Again, I can't speak for a lot of stuff on how the government is looking at things, but I've been able to work with a lot of the folks in parks, and just what these animals have done is crazy. You learn so much about how they're using the landscape, and some of the choices they've made. You'll when I've been out there in the backcountry in the summer, you'll look and they're up on these high mountain slopes, and you're like, why are you up there? What's you predict they'd be down in the valley bottoms all the time, and no, they're spending months up on this ridge way up in the middle of nowhere. They're the Panthers, exactly. Yeah.
That's amazing.
They like to go hiking.
Yeah, they're real nature lovers.
Great, they love the scrambling back there. It's just fantastic.
So is it at the point now that if a rando hiker goes to Banff, they might see a bison? Are they just around now?
Totally. Yeah. There are signs up if you go into the reintroduction zone that let you know, be aware, especially in July and August when they're running, there are bison back here.
Right.
What I tell most folks is you're probably not likely to see them. There are a couple of areas where they'll bounce around between, but unless you happen to be in the right place at the right time, there's not so many of them that they're going to be, everywhere, wherever you go. So it really just comes down to timing, and the area that they're in is so remote that you have to to get in there and get out, you need to at least book 4 days off for yourself to actually go and explore those regions.
Okay.
Yeah. All right, so that's what the bison love.
Wow. Do you know if there's other reintroductions planned? This seems like a big all-around success for the bison anyway. We'll get back to the birds, but are there other plans to reintroduce them somewhere else?
I know there are lots of right now that's kind of the goal is to have, for a lot of bison conservation, is exactly that, have those reintroductions and more conservation herds. I don't know of any that Parks is planning specifically right now, but I know a lot of First Nations groups are leading that. I can't remember off any of the top of my head. I know the Stoney Nakoda and the Blackfoot down in the south of Alberta all have their own conservation herds that I think they're probably continuing to expand. But off the top of my head, I don't know any that are planned for the future. But that is a big goal for bison conservation right now.
Very cool.
On that, I know. So I did some research in Waterton Lakes National Park in southwest Alberta in the early aughts, in the early 2000s, and I know they had a bison enclosure. Do you happen to know anything about that? What was up with those bison? Were those for reintroduction? Was it more of a zoo? I just know there's a little bison fenced in park.
Yeah, I love that. I've been to the one in Waterton a couple of times. I don't know exactly 100% if theirs was just like a little conservation one, like you said, like almost like a zoo style, just to have them around.
Mm-hmm.
Banff actually had one like that up to 1999. We had like a little paddock underneath of Cascade Mountain, which we decommissioned. And the purpose of that was sort of like that early conservation of like, oh my God, we only have a few hundred of these left. Like we just need to make more of them. Like it doesn't matter, put them in a little pasture and just make more babies. So Waterton's might have been a similar philosophy, but I'm not 100%.
Yeah, just curious.
If you don't mind a fun story with Waterton's, I can tell you something kind of cool with theirs.
Yes,
please.
Are you familiar with the Keno wildfire in 2017? I think it was. Have you guys heard about that? So super cool. There's this massive fire that burned through the park, and they were trying to evacuate the bison herd. And they managed to get all of them but one. This one old bull, stubborn son of a gun, they couldn't get him out. And eventually they had to be like, well, the fire is coming on. We're getting into a dangerous situation here. Like if he's not coming, we gotta go.
Right.
So they leave and they're like, all right, darn, this sucks. But there's a little lake in that bison paddock. And when they flew over again to like see what had happened, the smoke's clearing and they see this bison just like hunkered down in the lake, like just sitting there like totally fine. The fire burned around him. He just kind of like waited it out in the water.
Wow.
Makes you think like if that's what they would do, like in a real wildfire in the grassland scenario, is hunker in a little pond.
Why not? I mean, that makes sense.
Right?
There must be that against part of the natural landscape, and so you do have to develop some kind of. They probably wouldn't have made it to 100 million if every wildfire just wiped them out.
This is a big barbecue.
Sounds great.
Okay, so birds. Back to the birds. So what have you seen so far in terms of how the bird community is reacting, good or bad, to the bison?
Yeah, I don't have a huge amount yet. Like I'm still kind of working through my data set right now, but I'm hoping to have that ready for the fall. Anecdotally, what I've noticed is a lot more cowbirds, which is kind of cool. They're these birds that historically would follow the bison herds, and nowadays have kind of clung more to cattle and horses. But around the bison themselves, you'll see them buzzing around all the time, and they're kind of neat. They're what they call brood parasites. So they'll actually like go to the nests of other birds, flip their eggs out, and put their own eggs in there, and get the other bird to like raise their young for them.
Those jerks.
I know, right?
I did my undergrad project on cowbirds.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah,
so
little jerks. They're smart, and they have crazy calls.
Yeah, it's like water, like boop, boop, like kind of.
Wow.
Yeah.
So what other bird types are you looking at?
I think right now what I'm kind of parsing through, I think I'm looking at like Western meadowlarks, which I believe are kind of dependent on shrubs. Basically, what I kind of want to do is have a just an array of the different ecotypes that I'm hoping will be affected by the bison. So a couple species that are really like well associated with forests, a couple that are really dependent on like say taller shrubs, maybe some with smaller ones, and then some grassland species and kind of looking and seeing how those abundances will change depending on how intensely the bison are using those different regions in the park.
Whoa.
Amazing.
Aside from birds, Alexander, what are some other types of organisms that you think might be highly impacted by the bison?
Totally. Insect community, that'll be a big one. Their dung, they deposit so many different types of nutrients and such through there. Like you'll look on the patties after they plop one down, and there's just like beetles and flies and all sorts of stuff swarming over them. It's crazy.
Delicious.
Who doesn't love? Oh, absolutely.
Dung beetles love it.
It's high in fiber, it's great.
Yeah.
It's good stuff. Good stuff.
Now, are there other animals that are also being, I mean, you're studying birds, but surely as you say, they're engineers like beavers of the landscape. Like, I'm sure it impacts like so many other, like wolves, I guess, as like get impacted. What are some other examples?
I mean, I could think it won't really be an effect necessarily in Banff, but like, if you have a situation like bison are really good at creating trails, so they actually will like penetrate deeper into the forest. I was actually having a conversation with one of my graduate advisors about this recently, where we like bison will, like I said, they'll push back forests not just through like eating, let's say like regrowth after a fire. They'll actually like rub their heads up against a tree and like cause the tree to fall over.
Whoa!
So I was asking like, does that happen a lot? And he goes, well, another thing you can think of is like, yeah, that'll happen. But they'll go into the backcountry and like create these like really well-defined trails and like push all these trees out of the way. And suddenly they open up these like dense pockets of forest to other animals that probably couldn't have gone in there before. So now you have maybe like wolves getting into these dense areas, maybe different like elk or something. So maybe it changes up the geographic landscape a little bit in terms of what sort of animals can get into different parts of the park and kind of mess with I don't know, the politics, quote unquote, of the animals.
Right. So these bison really hate forests. So like, get out of here, forest. We want more grassland because that's where we rule. Right.
Yeah, if you want forest, you go talk to the wood buffalo. We're plains bison. We're not dealing with any of this.
So, for people who haven't seen a bison is like, it looks like a dinosaur. It is huge.
It's like the size of a cat, right?
No. They're much
like
bigger.
The caterpillar, the bulldozer. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, exactly. They're massive. If I think about being a wolf,
which you do,
I frequently do. Taking down an elk, yeah, they've got the antlers, but otherwise, like, they don't have that thick head of hair. It's easy to get to that neck. It doesn't seem very imposing. A bison, I would stay away from bison. So, like, do we have any sort of idea of how likely a wolf is to go for a bison? Like, is it a big issue? Because they seem like I would stay away unless I was desperate from eating. It
sounds like
bison.
They go after the calves.
Yes.
Right.
100%. That's so basically like, I don't know, there's the scene from like The Lion King where where the hyenas are talking about like, oh, can't we just pick up one of the old ones or the little ones? It's sort of the same deal with the bison.
Right.
Like, if you're old or sick or you're like a young undefended calf, that's really the ones that they're going to get. So yeah, really wolf mortality is usually not enough to keep the population from going down. Like, it's still going to climb pretty dramatically, even as the wolves get better at hunting them. The other thing is that like there's a really interesting report released by Parks a couple years ago where the wolf population never really gets super high in the park because wolves don't recognize human boundaries. So when they go out of the park, they experience quite a lot of mortality. Either a lot of them are legally trapped or hunted as soon as they get out of the park. It just it's just a reality out there. So their hunting pressure from wolves is always so. Historically, usually wolves and human beings were the big predators, and it was really humans that were the ones that provided the most mortality. Were the biggest kind of predators for most bison.
So, Alex, what drew you to this project? What is it? Was it the birds? Was it the location? Was it just the massive beauty of the bison?
Yeah, it's a funny story. The location, like I've always loved the mountain parks, and getting to work in Banff with the team out here, and with the University of Manitoba as well, and like the expertise I've had from my advisor has been amazing. But the reasoning behind it is kind of a funny story, and I hope I have enough time to tell it. It's kind of I won't take too long with it, but so a colleague of mine, his name is Thomas. I had met him back in May of 2018. And the bison release occurred in July of 2018. So there's this little window where I'd started working with Parks, and the bison hadn't been released yet. And at the time, both Thomas and I were working as interpreters, so like tour guides, basically, at a historic site in the town of Banff. And one of the people on the bison project had set up a presentation like thing in a museum that we worked at. And on a whim, I happened to ask her one day, like, hey, can we go and see the bison? Is that possible? And she was like, yeah, if you're willing to walk 4 days up this trail in the park, you can go and see them. And I was like, huh. So I'd known Thomas for about a month, but we had the same days off, and I kind of got to know him. I'm like, do you want to go and walk up 4 days to go see some bison? And he was like, sure.
Wow.
So we did that. It was my second ever backcountry hike. I think it was his first ever backcountry hike in the mountains. And two of us went relatively, I think we prepared pretty well, but like as far as experience goes, we were pretty inexperienced at this stuff. Managed to walk all the way up there.
Wow.
And we made it to where they were being held. We got to the Panther, and Parks is basing them out of, there's a warden cabin there, which is what they used to use to patrol the backcountry way back in the days. And during the soft release phase, they were all based out of this big cabin. And I remember this moment of like, our feet were so sore, we're so tired walking through. And I look up and I'm like, it's the Canadian flag! We made it! We see the guy all celebrating. But we made it there, and we got to meet a fellow named Karsten Hoyer, who's now the guy that I reported to on the project when I was working with Parks, who is the genius basically behind the whole project, who met us there. And he was like, yeah, you guys are one of like 10 people to come and see the site.
Wow.
And he showed us around a little bit and talked with us at length about the project, and got like, I made an impression with him. And a couple years later, when I was looking at master's projects, I was talking with my advisor, Dr. Nicola Coper, And she again, it was one of those things where like when you apply for the lab, you obviously will always you should read your advisor and say what, make sure that you're well understanding what kind of research she does. So I wrote this whole thing like, I am interested in working in the prairies and the grasslands. This is what I want to do. And she was like, that's wonderful. What do you actually want to do? Like, oh, well, mountains. And I had thought about this. I was like, oh, well, there's this Bison project. I wonder. And I sent an email to Karsten, and basically because I had done this hike back in 2018, they remembered me, and it kind of gave me that little bit of an edge that they were like, oh, okay, we know this guy's committed. And, it sort of worked where like I had this idea because I did that, and it gave me a little bit of more credence with the team so that I could get their support and some of their, basically their allowable to kind of help work with them a little bit on this project. And based my research off of it.
Unbelievable.
Amazing.
4 days. All it took to get that master's project was a 4-day hike.
Yeah, that's it. Easy.
That's right. Easy peasy. That's all you gotta do. It's just 4-day hike, and then if you want to self-fund, go work up in the Arctic for 1.5 years, and you're good to go. It's so much fun.
Yeah.
So, Alexander, have you always been interested in biology? Like, what was little Alexander like? Were you interested in animals, or is this really a different path for you than you would have expected?
Oh, geez. I bounced around a lot as a kid. Like, my very first thing I wanted to be was a train engineer. I wanted to drive
of course,
trains
the natural,
so bad. The natural thing for any little kid. It's like, oh yeah, big locomotive. Let me go for it. I think around grade 8, like if you knew me in junior high, like I really wanted to be an airline pilot. But eventually I decided to turn away from that. Just didn't quite have the drive for it. And thankfully I didn't. I actually ended up getting a little bit sad. I ended up getting diagnosed with epilepsy a few years ago. So dodged a bullet there, because then I would have been grounded for life. And thankfully it's a very mild form of epilepsy, so it's good. But anyway, moving all that aside, after that I really gave it a thought, and I did a lot of hiking, and I always felt a lot happier and more at peace in the mountains. And it kind of clicked like, oh, park warden. That's a career. I could just live out here and live this lifestyle and learn about these beautiful places. I don't have to just visit for a week in July. I can just be here as long as I want and like help to, better protect these places and learn about them and teach other people about them. And kind of worked out that way. It's just kind of cool.
Wow. And then that led you into natural resource management. What was your undergrad in?
It's from the University of Alberta. I did the Environmental and Conservation Sciences program, and that was with the agricultural faculty that school has.
Very cool.
When we talk about natural resources management, it's not a term that everybody uses colloquially. It's not a very common or familiar term. Like, can you say a little bit about what does that mean? What kind of stuff do you do in natural resources management?
Yeah, it's been a really interesting program to be a part of, because the majority of people in my program, the majority of the labs really are social science based. The Cooper lab is the only one that really does natural physical sciences. So most of the classes that I was in was with a lot of social scientists. And it was really good. It's a very challenging thing for me as like a classical Western scientist, because like a lot of the classes were like, this is how science has failed human beings. This is how it has led to like exclusion of different people. This is how we've kind of had like environmental racism and injustices in like urban ecology, and national parks or any kind of parks in general have had issues with like removing people from the land or disenfranchising people. And it's been kind of eye-opening in that way. So I guess the way I would like kind of describe my program's approach is like trying to marry, it's like an interdisciplinary program. So marrying like the strengths of Western science, which still has those strengths, with like traditional ecological knowledge and social science, and trying to come up with that like, that whole two-eyed seeing approach, and something that's a bit more holistic, and trying to kind of produce like the best ways of managing ecosystems where human beings are considered to be part of that ecosystem.
Yeah, great. I love that.
And where do you see Alexander going in the future? Do you think you're still dead set on being a park ranger, or has your vision of what you're going to be doing changed?
Are you going to ride Bison?
Yeah. I don't, it's tough to say. Like, the times that I've worked with parks in the past has been a real honor. I don't know, like it's an interesting thing with the natural resources world. You can go a lot of different places, be it in the mountain parks or the West Coast would be kind of cool to try, or maybe the territories. I've spent a lot of time up north, so I don't know if I want to go up too far again. Resolute is a beautiful city, but I don't know if I want to spend a winter there. It's kind of tough to say. Right now, it's that whole thing with like, I love nature. It's beautiful. I love the work that I do. boy, cost of living is really high right
Yes.
now. Where can I find like the right balance
Sweet
there?
spot.
But
That's a good challenge for sure.
So you were in Resolute. Did you ever see like a polar bear?
No, and actually I should say I only stayed in Resolute for a few days. I was actually up in or for a few hours. I was up in Eureka for the most of that, which is a little Arctic research station way up on Ellesmere Island.
Whoa.
Luckily, did not see any polar bears up there. There was one, I think, a month after I left, but saw lots of Arctic wolves and foxes, which is really cool.
Very cool.
There's nowhere to hide. There's nowhere to hide.
No, they don't know people up there, so it's a very weird thing where they'll just kind of like stare at you, and they're like, "I don't know what you are, man. You're kind of strange." Oh well, and they're just kind of, but it's really good for wildlife photography because you can just kind of stand there and,
right,
you know,
right. They just think you're a weird
models.
seal.
A weird seal.
Yeah, they hopefully not exactly.
Oh yeah, I guess they'd eat you.
Yeah, exactly.
Don't wear that sealskin coat. In front of
darn.
the, yeah,
my seal plan is ruined.
Oh no.
So you mentioned in your bio you like Dungeons and Dragons. Do you want to talk about are you the dungeon master or are you one of the playing characters in your group?
I have a group that I've been playing with since 2017, which on paper shouldn't really work too well. Like we're all online. One of them lives in Northern Carolina. They just moved to California. The other two are in California, and we got a guy in Australia. And it just so happens that our time zones all line up. We can meet once a week.
For 5 years. That is incredible.
Right? It really is. It's crazy, but it works well. Like me and the North Carolinian, the two of us will swap off. So I'll DM for about a year, then they will take the next year after that. And it's good. It's a good system that we've worked out, and it's always a lot of fun.
I'm new to D&D. I just had like 4 meetings so far.
Yeah.
Do you have any advice for a new D&D player? I'm a fighter. So currently my games are just I show up and I punch things. Is that just my lot in life? Like there's not much beyond that for me?
Oh, for a fighter, I mean, it depends. If you really lean into the role play section of it, you can have I think you can have a lot of fun with it. You're not going to be really succeeding on like persuasion checks or anything with those guys.
I've learned that one.
Yeah, it's true. But you can always play up the comedy with it. Like, I don't know, you can have a lot of untowards or just I find it's kind of fun whenever the fighter is kind of like, oh, I'm a very big strong man, I'm gonna go out and I'm gonna arm wrestle this small child, and they roll a natural one and no, my pride out, darn it all. So you can find that you can at least have some fun with the role play moments.
Yeah, that's what I need to do. I'm so focused on the fighting. I need to do more of the side stuff.
I don't blame you. Yeah.
And so for hiking, what is your favorite hike that you've had?
Yeah, what's some
That's a toughie.
highlight hikes?
Trying to think. Okay, I'm gonna try to think of an official one that I can tell that won't just spoil a bunch of the really cool ones. One that I really, really enjoy actually is in Lake Louise. There's one called Plain of the Six Glaciers. So you go up from the start of the lake shore, and it goes up into the Alpine, and it's this beautiful, beautiful hike, a very gradual climb up towards the Victoria Glacier. And my favorite part of it is it ends at a tea house. So you get this wonderful hike, relatively easy, and you get to have cake and tea at the end of it. So
that sounds pretty good.
How do they get their supplies up there?
I think horseback. I think they take horses up there.
I was joking. Wow.
Yeah. They pack them in, and that's how they do it. It's pretty cool.
That's incredible.
Oh my gosh, that's dedication.
So for like when you're hiking, what do you bring? What's your pack list?
Are you talking day hike or overnight?
Overnight. Let's go overnight.
Overnight for myself, I'll usually, I'll take like a light tent with me. I've got a dry bag for all my food and everything. And for food, I found a friend of mine actually introduced me to this great brand. It's a company from India. I think they're called MTR. They have like pre-done curries, which you just pop in like boiling water and they boil through. And because they're Tetra packs, it's not like you're rehydrating anything. Like it's just like a nice curry with like fresh-ish chickpeas.
Wow.
So good. I can eat that stuff all day. And I've got like a nice down sleeping bag, like a little thermarest to sleep on. Usually I have like a compass with me, cover for the bag. So you can buy like for your backpack a kind of like a rain cover thing.
Right.
Really important to always have like a rain jacket. And then in the mountain parks especially, it's really good to have either a spot device or an inReach, because there's no cell service out there. So if you have any kind of trouble. What's that, sir?
How does it communicate and what does it do?
It's a satellite emergency beacon, yeah. So the spots, you just press it and it sends out like, there is a problem, versus an inReach where you can actually text and say what the problem is. So most people they'll kind of recommend the InReach over the Spot, but Spots are a little bit cheaper, and they can pretty much do the same thing. So it's kind of up to you, but yeah, that's always really important to have back there.
Yeah,
and
of course.
First aid kit and stuff, lots of snacks. It's pretty good.
And your cookie supply, your cookie baking supply.
I will say, if I'm just soloing and I'm tenting and everything, I don't tend to do the cookies on that one unless I'm being real bold. But if I get to use the cabins and I can travel a little bit heavier, then I'll start a little fire and I'll get those going.
Nice.
What's your number one tip for baking cookies in the backcountry? Is there like one thing you have to nail?
Do a test batch for sure, because you're never going to get the heat just right.
I was going to say, how do you regulate the temperature on a fire for a cookie? You've got more guts than me.
I had to I remember asking someone who worked at a historic site and had one of those old wood-fired stoves, and I was like years ago, how do they do it? And they're like, you just kind of stick your hand in there, and you learn by heat after a while. Okay, it's that hot. That's really dark. Okay, we'll go a little bit shorter on the next time.
Well, Alexander, this has been amazing. Thank you so much for joining us and sharing your amazing work with us.
What an amazing story of bison and nature and the landscape. It sounds incredible.
Thank you so much. It's been so cool talking to you both. It's been a real pleasure. Thank you for having me.
And good luck wrapping up.
Thank you.
That was so cool.
How amazing is that?
Have you seen a bison, Vinny?
I've only ever seen pictures of bison. I don't think I've ever seen one in person.
It is a dream of mine to take Vinny to Waterton one day.
I would love to go.
I spent so many beautiful summers there, and they have that bison paddock. I don't know that I have it in me to hike 4 days.
No?
But it sounds beautiful.
I'll
have
let
to
you
work
know how
up
it
to
goes.
that.
I'll let you know how it goes.
Yeah, you're going?
I'm going.
You're going to make cookies?
Definitely. Well, I'll bring cookies.
You'll bring cookies.
I'll bring cookies. So I forgot the tent. I just brought cookies.
Well, because you brought that tube of cookie dough.
Yeah,
exactly.
exactly.
It was the size of the tent.
And
yeah,
so
something had to go.
So the tent, I don't need it. The cookies, though.
You'll
sleep on a bed of cookies,
and
then as I sleep,
I mean, the log of cookie dough could
good
do
pillow?
as a log
neck pillow.
A neck pillow.
Is that what you're gonna bring on the airplane
Yes.
next time? Yeah.
That is smarter.
Just take a bite out of your neck pillow.
Yeah, just take a bite.
It's the dream.
That is the dream. Wow.
Well, that's another episode of
That was very cool. We learned about so much. We learned about atoms and what's going on inside those protons and neutrons.
We learned about the eyeballs of a T-Rex.
T-Rex, that's right. Cool. Big, powerful jaws come at a cost to your eyes. Who'd know?
Who knew?
Who knew?
And then we learned about bison.
So much.
There used to be so many bison.
And then we ate them all.
Or just killed them all.
Hopefully they got eaten.
I don't think they all got eaten.
It's so sad.
Yeah.
But it makes my heart shine to know. It makes my heart warm to know how easily they were resilient.
Yeah.
Right? Like they were in captivity for so long, and then you release them and they're just like, yeah, we're good. You're like, no issues.
No problems.
Yeah, finally. Thanks for getting around to it.
Well, it's probably a lot of work on a lot of people's parts too.
No, for sure. But it's just
the bison, they know what to do, man.
The resilience of nature.
It's beautiful.
If you give it a chance.
Well, that's another episode of Learn Real Good. If you'd like to join us,
Oh.
if you're a grad student in Canada or the US, send us an email at learnrealgoodpodcast@gmail.com. learnrealgoodpodcast@gmail.com. Let us know that you would love to be a guest. Send us a little paragraph about what you're up to, and we'll sign up a meeting so we can chat with you.
And how about our socials, Vinny?
Well, if you want to join us on social media, check out LRG Pod on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. Yes, we actually have it. We set up TikTok. There's material there.
Not much. We're getting used to it. Okay, we're not Zoomers. Learning TikTok is a learning curve.
Yeah.
And if you're a fan, if you're a learner out there that enjoys the show, please give us a 5-star rating and a written review. It would be lovely. We currently have one. Thank you, one person who wrote a review, but we would love more. That's it. Thank you, Vinny.
Thank you, Katie.
Thank you, Alexander. And thank you, learners. See you next time.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.